What is the thing we don't talk about in your family? Story 1. Apparently, our dad had another kid about 8 years older than me. My mom let something slip about it after their divorce when she was angry about something. It was along the lines of, if he thinks he can forget you exist like that other kid of his. She then turned completely pale, and I was never able to get more out of her than that. My dad acts like he doesn't know what I'm talking about, but he apparently told my brother a bit of the story, only to backtrack and never mention it again. So yeah, apparently I'm not the oldest. Story 2. The fact that my cousin was kidnapped when he was a baby. Long story short, two young teenagers got pregnant, got married, and then my aunt wanted a divorce. But her husband was abusive and manipulative, so she fled out of state and came back to us, her family. He followed her, claiming he just wanted to talk. She led him inside, holding my baby cousin in her arms as he slept. Then, without warning, he grabbed the baby and ran. He took him out of state. After that, he took my aunt to court, accused her of abandoning her child, and refused to let her see him. 20 years later, my cousin sought us out, and we all reconnected. Thanksgiving dinners are great, but we don't talk about that whole ordeal. Story 3. My brother who died, we never ever talk about him. It's so strange. Growing up, I knew I had a brother. I knew he was hit and killed by a car while walking home. But aside from that, I don't know anything about him. I've seen his pictures. I know what he looked like, but I don't know his personality, his likes, his dislikes, the type of music he listened to. Nothing. Once, when I was younger, I found some of his old comics in my mom's closet, but that was about it. It almost feels like he was just a story, like he was never real. It wasn't until my grandfather passed about 11 years ago that it truly hit me. My mother and I walked to his grave, and she broke down into an inaudible mess. That was the first time I really understood. He was real. As crazy as it sounds, it had never sunk in before that moment. I can't imagine the pain of losing a child, but seeing my mom grieve like that, as if it had just happened, hurt more than I can explain. Since then, he was only mentioned once, by my dad a few months ago. Out of my mother, father, and sisters, I'm the tallest. My dad told me that the only one of us who was ever taller than me was Jimmy, and how he always seemed to keep growing. He said Jimmy probably would have towered over me. I almost cried. I wish I had gotten to know him. Story 4. When I was growing up, I always heard stories about my dad as a kid, hanging out in his mom's tavern. The first time we visited his hometown, he showed us his house, situated at a crossroads, split level, with the front door leading to the top floor. The lower floor, which opened out to the back, had a small road and parking area. That's where the tavern was. It wasn't until years later that it finally dawned on me. My dad grew up during Prohibition. My grandmother was a bootlegger, and it gets better. His hometown was on a road considered a bootlegger's highway from Canada. He went through jump school in the same class as Henry Hill, the man whose life Goodfellas was based on. One night when I was a teenager, a friend of his, someone I had never heard of, showed up at our door at 10 p.m. with two other guys. They were all Italian. They stayed the night and were gone by morning. His pension and whatever work he did after retiring couldn't possibly explain our lifestyle. My mom has forbidden me from looking into it any further. Story 5. That my parents died from AIDS in the early 90s when I was 2. Growing up, I never knew how my mother died. I was told my father just disappeared. I remember throwing a tantrum in middle school, desperate to know the truth about what really happened to them. That's when my aunt finally told me, well, more like yelled it at me. I remember crying alone in my room for hours. I'm pretty sure their deaths were the starting point for how strange my family is. Since that day, no one has ever brought it up again. I'm now 27, and as far as I know, we have never said the words HIV or AIDS out loud in my family. If it must be mentioned, it's referred to as that disease or something vague like that. My friends always wonder why I never talk about my parents. And honestly, I still struggle to tell people how they passed. It makes me feel so conflicted because I know I have nothing to be ashamed of. But my family, and in some ways, society, make it feel like their deaths should be swept under the rug. Story 6. My wife has HIV. I'm 30, and I know there's still a huge stigma surrounding it. That's why I keep it a 100% secret. But I feel like society is slowly starting to see it as more of a manageable condition rather than a death sentence. At least that's how I see it. With treatment, it's barely even contagious anymore. We took a very slight risk, something like 1 in 100,000, when we decided to have children naturally. But today, myself and our two daughters remain completely free of the virus. I'm not saying people should do what we did, because there was some risk, but modern medicine has made it far less dangerous. Since a couple of years before we reconnected and started dating, and up until now, her viral levels have always been undetectable. She gets tested monthly, and I get tested twice a year. Undetectable means that in a 10 milliliter blood sample, no HIV can be found. They can detect as little as 5 viral cells in a sample that contains about 75 million white blood cells. I'm considered virus-free because I've never had it. She's considered undetectable because she does have it, but her immune system and medication keep it fully suppressed. In the end, our blood tests look the same. No detectable viral load. Not sure why I went on this huge rant. I guess I just wanted to say, I'm sorry your parents had to go through what they did, but tomorrow's a new day, and we can talk about these things more openly now. Story 7. My grandfather remarried a woman who almost immediately developed Alzheimer's and forgot who he was. Now he's dating his first wife, while his actual wife is left in a state of confusion, unable to recognize anyone. He refuses to divorce her because her family, who should have been responsible, completely bailed when they realized how expensive her care was going to be. That left my family to step in and arrange for her care, because she was too much for my grandfather to handle alone. He's almost 90. I called out the relevant members of her family for abandoning her, and they told me I was being rude. Maybe I was, but I was also absolutely right. Story 8. My two cousins, a brother and sister, were caught having a Sewell relationship. It turned out that they had been involved for years. Ben was 19, and Ann was 20 when it all came to light. Both of them had been Sewelly abused by a family friend when they were children, and they formed an intense bond over that trauma. My aunt was horrified when she found out. She told them that their relationship wouldn't be tolerated and immediately decided to send Ben to live with relatives in Australia. Ben was devastated, not just about being found out, but at the thought of being separated from his sister. He attempted to take his own life. My aunt found him mid-attempt. She grabbed his legs and held him up, screaming for help until a neighbor heard and called an ambulance. Ben survived, but he suffered a severe brain injury as a result. Now in his 40s, he is completely incapacitated. He cannot walk or speak. He drools constantly and makes loud, unintelligible noises. It breaks my heart. No one ever speaks of Anne. She completely vanished after everything happened. She cut off all contact with the family and disappeared from our lives. When it first happened, the official story was that Ben had suffered a severe accident and broken his neck. I only found out the full truth last year, after more than 20 years, when my dad finally told me. Story 9. I was always told that my biological grandfather on my mom's side died in a rock climbing accident right before my mom was born. Last year, I found out the truth. While attending a military college in the South in the 1960s, my grandmother discovered something about him that she had never expected. He liked to wear women's clothing. She found a box of dresses all in his size hidden in his closet. The next day, she came back to his room and found him hanging from the ceiling. She and two of her brothers panicked. They smuggled his body out of the room and convinced a coroner to rule it an accident. To this day, I don't even know how many people in the family know the real story. But one thing is for sure, no one talks about it. Story 10. It was Thanksgiving. My parents had recently returned from Hawaii, and my dad wanted to show everyone the photos. He connected the digital camera to the giant flat-screen TV and started a slideshow. Of my mother naked, in their bedroom, he scrolled through several photos before quickly shutting it off and muttering, "Whoops, wrong cartridge." I was 21, and my boyfriend was spending the holidays with us for the first time. My mom started crying. My boyfriend went completely silent. I just managed to say, "Oh my God." Somehow, my 100-year-old grandma missed the whole thing. We never speak of it. If it ever gets brought up, my mother immediately yells, "We swore to never mention that," and turns red-faced. Story 11. To break the pattern of secret relationships and estranged relatives, here's something different. My family does not talk about cottage cheese. I can tell you're curious, so let's start from the beginning. My father is a lover of all things dairy. As a child, he drank so much milk that his mother used to say, "You either need to become a dairy farmer or marry a farmer's daughter." And when he and my mom got married, he did just that. Dad also loves cheese. Hard cheese, soft cheese, and most notably, cottage cheese. However, my dad is also extremely squeamish. He cannot handle the sight or even the thought of blood, body fluids, or cheese curds. This makes enjoying his cottage cheese by the quart a challenge. No one is allowed to talk about cheese, curds, whey, or how it's made when he's eating it. If someone dares to bring it up, he shuts the conversation down by throwing his hands in the air and yelling, "We don't talk about that." Story 12. My mother's mental and physical abuse of me and my sister during our childhood. I can't talk about it with her because every conversation goes the same way. That never happened turns into, well, if it did happen, it didn't happen like that, which then becomes, and even if it happened like that, you provoked me, so it's your fault. On some level, I think she truly believes she wasn't abusive. She had an even worse upbringing herself, so in her mind, the fact that she did better means she did good. I can't talk about it with my sister because she's much older than I am. She left the house the second she could, which I don't blame her for. But she didn't just cut off our mom, she cut off all of us. I've tried reaching out, but she's never been interested in reconnecting. I can't talk about it with extended family because my mom never did anything in front of them, and I've always been seen as a screw-up. I have zero credibility. I tried confiding in an aunt I used to be close with once, and she immediately scolded me for making up stories before going straight to my mother and telling her everything I had said. That was when I knew. If she didn't believe me, no one else would either. So I never brought it up again. Story 13. My dad never talks about his sister. She stole thousands from their father, fled to New Mexico, and is now hosting my great-uncle while waiting for him to pass so she can claim his belongings. I don't know if he's actually planning to leave her anything, but she seems convinced he will. I haven't seen my aunt in over a decade, but she has always been a real piece of work. My mom complains about the situation a lot, but the rest of her family doesn't like to acknowledge how little they talk to her. Years ago, there was a huge argument about my mom's parenting, mostly because of me, and ever since then, her sister and parents have barely spoken to her. My family also refuses to talk about my parents' disciplinary methods. For years, their idea of punishment involved taking one of us unruly children, throwing us into a tub of cold water, and dunking our heads under while yelling at us. They did this every time they thought one of us was seriously out of line. They also once force-fed my sister mustard because she hates it. Maybe now you can see why my relatives disagree with my mom's parenting. Story 14. When I was about 5 years old, my mom, grandma, brother, and I were about an hour from home when we stopped to get gas. My mom went inside to pay but realized she was 13 cents short. She told the clerk, "Be right back, I'll get it from the car." We all went back outside and my mom handed me the 13 cents, asking me to go back inside and pay the clerk. By the time I got inside, a line had formed. Not realizing I could have just walked up to the front to hand over the money, I patiently waited my turn. When I finally finished and walked outside, I saw our minivan driving away. My family was gone. I was left alone in an unfamiliar neighborhood, 50 miles from home. I was scared, but I remember thinking, surely this isn't as abnormal as it feels. They'll be right back, right? Then I started crying. I sat on a concrete slab next to the gas station, unsure of what to do. I don't know how long I sat there, but after what felt like several minutes, I finally saw our van pulling back into the parking lot. My mom was sobbing when she got out. She hugged me, kissed me, and kept apologizing. Apparently my brother, who was 7 at the time, had closed the heavy sliding door, and my mom, hearing the sound, assumed it meant I had climbed back in. She started driving away thinking, how long could it take to deliver 13 cents? The story definitely makes my mother look bad, but I was so young when it happened, and it was so out of character for her that I never held it against her. For the next 15 years, we'd tell the story and laugh about it. Even my mom would laugh. It turns out, though, that her laughter was forced. It tore her up inside every time we brought it up. One day, she finally confessed how much it weighed on her. After that, we all just silently agreed never to mention it again. We weren't mad at her. We had completely forgiven her and made sure she knew that, but she was never able to forgive herself. She's still around, and she's an amazing mother. We just don't tell that story anymore. Story 15. My sister-in-law has one of my parents' credit cards, which she originally used for grocery shopping on their behalf. However, she now uses it to buy groceries for her own family, even though she and my brother are financially well off. My brother has no idea that she's been spending $400 to $500 per month on their card. I told my parents they should confront her and let my brother know, but they're too afraid. They worry that if they say anything, she'll get mad and refuse to bring their grandchildren around. I even offered to cancel the card or confront her myself, but they told me to stay out of it. I try to respect their wishes, but it's incredibly awkward whenever I'm around my brother. Story 16. The parrot from Hawaii. When I was in kindergarten, my family took a trip to Honolulu. While we were there, a man on the street asked if we wanted to take photos with his parrots. My sisters and I were thrilled, so my parents agreed. The man had each of us holding a parrot or letting one sit on our shoulders while my mom snapped pictures. Then he asked my dad to kiss the parrot. My dad was absolutely not on board with this, but to make the family happy and to get away from the parrot guy, he did it. That's when the parrot chomped his lip, blood and everything. To this day, over 10 years later, mentioning the parrot will set off a 20-minute rant from my dad about parrot negligence. He gets so worked up that he has to go fix something in the garage. Do not bring up the parrot. Story 17. My sister has an eating disorder. She eats a ton and then vomits. She jogs for an hour or more every single day, even though her knees are in constant pain. She refuses to eat carbs, just fruits and vegetables. I seem to be the only one who recognizes how serious this is. Everyone else sees it as just a phase in a young woman's life, even though it's been like this for 3 years. I have no idea when my parents even noticed. Whenever I try to say something, I get shut down. Later, I'm expected to justify my insensitive behavior to my parents, so I've just given up on arguing. I don't know what to do to change things without tearing the family apart. Story 18. My grandparents try to present the perfect family image. The reality? My mom never met her real dad. My step-grandfather, who we never acknowledge as anything but her father, was a drunk until he switched to pain pills. Pills my grandmother steals and takes herself. One of my uncles married a girl after getting her pregnant at 15. Turns out her sister was actually her mother, the result of some religious scandal. My other uncle has been on a gambling binge for 30 years. My mom died after becoming addicted to the same opiates the family loves. She had an aneurysm. I once caught my grandfather masturbating to Baywatch, and yet we never say a word. Edit just to clarify, I'm a woman from an upper-middle-class family. One side is mostly Native American, the other Jewish. My family has had great careers and maintains a flawless public image. So no, it's not as big of a mess as people assume. More like a pack of rabid dogs behind closed doors. My aunt only discovered that her sister was actually her mother after some genetic testing was done for unrelated medical reasons. She grew up believing her grandmother was her mother and that her mother was her sister. Jehovah's Witness family. I can't respond to all the questions. I'm kind of a hermit and I've never had so much attention before, but thanks for peeking into my skeleton closet. Story 19. Mental health. My dad suffers from severe depression and often tries to self-medicate with alcohol. He's not an alcoholic by any means, but he drinks for the wrong reasons, and it's not healthy. I struggle too. Depression, suicidal thoughts, loneliness, anxiety disorder. My brain is fed up, but I didn't even know about my dad's issues until I was an adult. I had been dealing with these feelings since childhood, but I kept quiet, thinking that speaking up would make me seem weak or broken. I remember being around 13 and posting a Facebook status that said, Rachel Leanne, 17, is mad at the world but doesn't know why. People started reaching out to my mom, asking if something had happened to me. She got angry and told me to take it down. That was it. No conversation about why I felt that way. No concern. It really messed me up. So in my future home, mental health will be acknowledged and taken care of, just like physical health. Story 20. My uncle died of autoerotic asphyxiation when he was in high school. As a kid, I was just told he had died and that they'd explain when I was older. When I was a preteen, I selfishly and stupidly pushed my mom for more details. She finally admitted that he had died from hanging, but left it vague, saying they didn't know exactly what had happened. For years, my teenage brain kept the possibility open that maybe he'd actually been murdered. Then one day I happened to see Oprah doing an episode about AES. For some reason, it really stuck with me. Probably because I was just reaching the age where I was starting to masturbate and didn't want to die. The next time I was at my mom's, my dad raised me, she mentioned that Oprah had done an episode about how my uncle had died. She had even taped it, and said it would be easier for me to just watch the episode to understand. It clicked immediately. I never watched it. And in the 30 years since, I don't think it's ever been mentioned again. Story 21. My parents were 7 years into a miserable marriage, with 2 other children when I was born. Apparently, my dad used to hit my mom pretty regularly, but I have no memory of it. My sister, who is 18 months older than me, remembers it all too well. Growing up, I witnessed verbal and psychological abuse, but never anything physical. It messed me up because I only found out about the beatings when I was 18. It explained the deep hatred my siblings had for him, something I never used to understand. No one ever talked about it. It always felt like I wasn't in on some big family secret. I don't think I'll ever bring it up. P.S. My parents are still married. Almost 30 years now. 30 miserable years. Story 22. My whole family was raised in the Episcopal Church, so naturally my parents took me and my little brother there and made us serve as acolytes, the kids who hold the candles and gospel. In high school, the Special Victims Unit knocked on our door. They sat me and my parents down and showed us evidence that I had suffered years of soul abuse at the hands of a male church employee. My mother refused to let me testify, repeating over and over again that it's just a woman's place. I wanted to confront the man so badly. I even received letters from other victims, girls I used to go to church with, begging me to help them put him away. But no one in my family ever mentioned it again. They never even took me to therapy. Just last week, at my college graduation, my brother and I got drunk and he confessed that he had somehow found out. He and his friends curb-stomped the man. I'm not a vengeful person, but for the first time I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. Story 23. One of my parents mistreated me severely. The other worked 80-hour weeks and had no clue. The worst part? My older sibling wasn't abused and was sometimes involved. Once I brought up a specific memory. I had been held against a wall by my parent while my sibling was ordered to kick me in the testes as a punishment. They broke down when I mentioned it, admitted it happened, got emotional, got blackout drunk. I don't even know if they remember. This went on for a good portion of my childhood, until I got strong enough to stand up for myself. I've only spoken to my sibling about it that one time. My family gets along well now, aside from some lingering tension between me and them. If my other parent found out, it would destroy them. Their health is already fragile. I've been able to move on and live a pretty healthy life, so I'm fine with never bringing it up again. Story 24. In the 70s, my dad bought a tiny Christmas ornament. A little man made of black pipe cleaner, decorated just enough to have a face. It was maybe 1/4 of an inch long, barely visible on the tree. It wasn't even supposed to be an ornament, really. Just a little pipe cleaner man whose arms could wrap around a thin branch. My dad called him Zulu Man, and he fing loved that thing. Every year when we unpacked the ornaments, he would joke, but not really joke, that if Zulu Man isn't there, Christmas is canceled. My sister and I would play along, checking the tree throughout the season and pretending to be horrified when we couldn't find him. My dad would run to double check, and we'd laugh until we couldn't breathe. Christmas was canceled and reinstated many times in our house. One year when I came home from college, we unpacked the ornaments. Zulu Man wasn't in his usual twist of tissue paper. My dad must have canceled Christmas 36 times while we searched, and my sister and I were in hysterics until we reached the bottom of the box, and he was still nowhere to be found. None of us said anything, even then. But the look on my dad's face broke my fing hard. I'll remember it as long as I remember my own name. Once, about 10 years later, I brought up Zulu Man. My mom and sister immediately shushed me. That was the last time I said his name. Still, every time I open an old box of books from my childhood home or dig through an old college bag, I feel this tiny, impossible hope that maybe, just maybe, I'll find Zulu Man clinging inside, waiting to hug his next tree branch, waiting to heal my father's heart. Story 25. My mother-in-law is enormously, grotesquely overweight, over 300 pounds, and truthfully, she is a burden to her children. She is, quite literally, the elephant in the room. For someone who isn't senile, she is the most mentally and physically helpless person I have ever met. Luckily, she can afford a first-class assisted living facility, but one of her sons has to manage all her finances and do her taxes, while the other handles her medical issues, prescriptions, and doctor visits. Neither of them is compensated. She could easily afford a taxi, but she refuses to pay for one. Instead, she expects us to endure hours-long commutes on congested freeways just to visit her. A simple lunch with her takes up most of the day. And when we do come, she has a list of things for us to buy, always heavy on diet soda, mini brandies, and champagne four-packs. She uses a cane but refuses to walk on her own, insisting on holding on to our arms as we walk very, very, very slowly, while we also carry her absurdly heavy handbag. She won't use a walker or wheelchair. She openly admits it's because she's too vain. But it's obvious that she enjoys being personally escorted far more than she actually needs it. It might sound like I don't like her. That's not true. She's a kind person, and she raised a wonderful son. As a person, I like her a lot. But I now have stage 4 ovarian cancer. It's terminal. Thankfully, I'm still mobile, not in pain yet, and able to drive. But watching my husband be her unpaid accountant, bookkeeper, and delivery service while I'm facing the end of my life is really starting to get to me. Story 26. I was always told that my aunt was never married, but I recently found out that she was married, and she had a son. Her husband was insanely conservative. When their son came out as gay, he completely shunned him, treated him like garbage, told him he was messed up, kicked him out multiple times. The whole "you're going to hell" treatment. One night, my aunt and her husband came home to find their son standing in the living room with his father's shotgun to his own head. He looked at his dad and said something like, "This is your fault." Then he pulled the trigger. The next morning, my aunt packed her bags, walked out, and never saw or spoke to her husband again. I remember being at a family reunion when I was little. One of my younger cousins asked why my aunt didn't have kids, since all my mom's other siblings did. She didn't say a word. She just left the room. The whole place fell silent. I never understood why, not until my mom told me the truth. I looked up his obituary. It listed his death as an accident. Story 27. My mom has 6 brothers, 6 uncles, but there's a 7th uncle, and he's older than my mom. I only realized it because of the way our language works. In our culture, the oldest sibling is called by the number 2, then the next is 3, and so on. My uncles call my mom number 3. So where is number 2? Exactly. My cousins have talked about him before, but when we look through old family photos, nothing. No sign of him. It's like he never existed. I asked my mom about it once, and she just shrugged and said she had no idea what I was talking about. One of my uncles once said he wanted to use Google to find him. He doesn't really understand how the internet works. The others just shrugged it off like it was nothing. So, yeah, I have a 7th uncle. I just have no idea who he is, what he looks like, or why my entire family refuses to acknowledge him. Story 28. My grandfather had a brother named Peter. Peter was a real piece of work, likely bipolar and psychotic, though never diagnosed back in the day. He made my great-grandparents afraid. But as he got older, he calmed down. Thankfully, this allowed my grandfather to leave home since he no longer needed to protect them. My great-grandfather died early, but my great-grandmother passed away just after my little brother was born. A few years before she died, Peter and his wife offered to take care of her. There was a small cottage on the property, and the deal was that if she signed the house over to them, she could live in the cottage while they made sure she was all right, clean, fed, and looked after. My other great-grandparents actually had a similar arrangement with my grandmother's sister, and it worked out perfectly. But Peter had no intention of honoring that deal. Once the house was signed over, they packed a bag with her clothes and dumped her at a state nursing home. She died there. My grandfather tried to arrange for her to be moved, but by the time he found out what had happened, they were in Britain while we were in Canada. She was too frail to be safely relocated. She spent her final days in that home. Almost everything she owned was taken by Peter. Her bank account drained, her belongings gone. The only things that survived were a few pieces of jewelry. Realizing what was going to happen, but after already signing the house over, she managed to collect what she could and secretly mailed them across the ocean to our family. Thanks to that, at least, we still have the garnet watch passed down through the men in our family, the family rings, and a few other keepsakes. Everything else? Peter took it. So, we don't talk about Peter, and I think if my grandfather ever saw him again, he would have killed him instead of the consequences. Peter didn't even show up to the funeral, for obvious reasons. Story 29. When my dad was 15, one of his friends shot himself in the head right in front of him and a group of their friends. I first heard this story from my mom when I was 18, and suddenly a lot of things about my dad made sense. especially his reactions to toy guns when I was a kid. I never brought it up, hoping that one day he would open up to me about it. Eventually he did, but we haven't talked about it since. I'm honestly amazed at how my dad turned out to be such a great man after experiencing something so awful at such a young age. But according to him, it never really left him. He still has nightmares about it. And even now, when he watches movies or TV shows where someone gets shot in the head, I can see him get really uneasy. Story 30. My brother had a few years of living the gay life. My entire family is way open-minded and pretty much lives by the motto, not my life, don't give a F. Personal choices are personal choices. Just find your happiness and enjoy it. My parents welcomed my brother and his boyfriend into our home for dinners, family events, everything. Even my grandmother, who was born at the beginning of the century, adored his partner. The guy was great in every way, and while he was around, he felt like part of the family. Then my brother changed. Again, he broke up with his boyfriend and went completely straight. Not bi, not even slightly flirtatious with men, just full-on, 100% straight. From pride parades to straight-laced suburbia. Since then, he's been married twice, has 5 kids and even a grandchild, and it's like those 4 years never even happened. No one mentions his ex-boyfriend's name. There are no family photos or videos of them together, and for the life of me, I'm pretty sure his kids have no idea about that part of his life. It's not that we're embarrassed. We weren't then, and we aren't now. And my brother isn't the type to live in shame either. So seriously, what the F? Sometimes I catch myself blinking, wondering if I imagined the whole thing. Maybe once in a blue moon, my mom and I will talk about it, just the two of us. And we shake our heads and chuckle. That happened, right, Mom? I think it did. I still have gifts from him. And then the conversation ends, not to be brought up again for years. What makes it even stranger? Our most beloved cousin is gay. A recently passed uncle was secretly bi. My niece is an unapologetically lesbian woman on a mission to complete the Pokédex of girlfriends. The whole family is cool with it, always has been. But apparently my brother was never gay or something. I don't get it. Help me understand this, Shash. Story 31. My dad has a drinking problem. He's the definition of a functional alcoholic. Very successful businessman, never let it interfere with his work, always provided well for our family. But like clockwork, at 4:30 p.m., the drinking starts. He's not violent or anything, just insufferable, incoherent, obnoxious, embarrassing depending on the setting. It's been getting worse now that he's semi-retired. He has so much free time, and I don't think he knows what to do with it. I worry because he's nearing 70, already past the age at which his own father passed away. I live far away, and our relationship is old school. I love him, and he loves me, but we don't say it. But just this week, I finally got the courage to write him a letter. A letter I've been wanting to write for 5 years. I could never bring myself to do it before. This time, I laid it all out. Told him I was worried, that we missed the old him, that time is running out. He can't keep putting off getting clean, because before long, it will be too late. Story 32. My older sister dropped out of school to have a baby. You can't bring it up without someone immediately adding, but she's so smart and such a hard worker now. She still treated the rest of the family like garbage and fully supported her husband's KKK activities. My other older sister was a hardcore drug addict and thug. You can't bring that up without someone suddenly saying, well, she turned herself around and loves God now. She's still a sociopath who treats people like resources, something to be used up and thrown away. My mother spent decades drinking and abusing her kids. If you mention it, she'll get drunk and abuse you too. She'll go through the whole narcissist prayer, denying anything ever happened, then twisting it to make it everyone else's fault but her own. But somehow it's always okay to talk about me being a failure, about how meaningless my fake illness is, or to point at me and laugh. Story 33. There's a good chance my older brother isn't my father's child. It's already suspicious because my dad's side of the family is full of tall, thin, blonde men, while my brother is 5 feet 6 inches, heavy-set, with curly brown hair and a tan complexion. Then there's the timing. When my mother announced she was pregnant, she was already 6 months along. She was in a bad situation. 2 young kids from another man, no stability, and she and my father had actually broken up months before she supposedly conceived. My brother also happens to look a lot like my half-sisters and their father. My dad stayed with her because he didn't know what else to do. She showed up on his doorstep pregnant with two small children, saying she was homeless. They divorced shortly after I was born. A few years ago, we all decided to do those ancestry DNA tests. All of my half-siblings and both of my parents are on there. But my brother, he hasn't taken one. Story 34. My uncles, my dad's brothers, do not get along. My cousins and I never knew why. We were always told it was just personality differences or sibling rivalry. I only found out the truth recently from my grandma. On my mom's side, not my dad's. Back in the 80s, when my dad's parents were still alive, my grandfather had a stroke and was taken to the hospital. My grandmother went to visit him, only to be told that only family was allowed inside. Confused, she told the receptionist, "I'm not a stranger. I'm his wife." And the nurse replied, "I'm sorry, but his wife is already in the room with him." And that's how she found out Grandpa had a mistress. Apparently, when he passed away, he left her an apartment and some money. One of my uncles sided with my grandmother. The other sided with my grandfather. They haven't really spoken to each other since. Story 35. I really don't like my kid. I fell for the usual women love babies myth. I work with kids and genuinely enjoy seeing them learn and grow. But the 24/7 reality of parenthood, it wears me down. I've never found it rewarding. Not once. Every moment with my own child is either boring or exhausting. And the more personality he develops, the less I like him. I would never hurt him. I provide for him. My partner took over as the primary caregiver so I can conserve my energy and do my best to be affectionate and friendly when I'm around him. But heaven help me if I so much as suggest that parenting is draining, let alone admit that I generally hate my kid and start feeling like I'd rather be dead after spending too much time with him. Even my partner won't touch the subject. Doctors blame my depression because apparently my meds fix every other symptom except the one where I don't like my child. Friends still think I'll snap out of it and want more kids in a few years. And everyone else? Either they see me as still depressed or they see me as a monster. The idea that someone could misjudge how much they enjoy children, that some people do regret having kids, that not everyone forms a magical bond with their own flesh and blood, is something no one around me seems capable of understanding. It's just total taboo. Story 36. My mom tried to exploit a distant cousin for her $1 million savings account, at the request of my vindictive, spiteful grandmother. The plan was to gain access to the money through the cousin's will, and to make that easier, they tried to push out the one person who could stop them, our cousin, a will and estate lawyer. They attempted to cut him off from the family, trying to debar him from having any influence. But the family they were trying to alienate, they turned out to be incredibly kind and loving. My mom didn't actually have anything personal against them. She just felt pressured to act out of loyalty to my grandmother, who was bitter, jealous, and determined to get a cut of the money as some sort of consolation prize. It wasn't until my grandmother was dying of leukemia in hospice that she realized how horribly she had handled the situation. She severed ties with an entire branch of our family over money. And in the end, none of it mattered. Just one of those things. Story 37. One summer when my older sister was 13, we went on our annual family vacation in New England. It was a big gathering, our immediate family, cousins, aunts, uncles, about 20 people in total. We were all at the beach when my sister decided to walk back to the cottage one of the families had rented. About an hour later, the rest of us returned by car, but she wasn't there. Panic set in. Everyone started searching for her, assuming she had gotten lost. When they finally found her, she was adamant she had not been lost. She said it just took longer because she walked while we drove. She knew exactly where she was the whole time. But no one believed her. They kept insisting she must have been lost, pushing the idea so much that she eventually broke down, crying, repeating over and over, "I wasn't lost." She's 30 now. And to this day, if someone even mentions that summer and jokes about her being lost, she will instantly start crying and yelling, "I was not lost." It's such a deep trigger that we have to quietly remind extended family never to bring it up. Story 38. Oh, where do I even begin? I come from a strict, conservative Indian family. There are certain topics that are completely off limits. My ex, or the fact that I had a relationship before marriage, that's considered a sign of poor character. My treatment for anxiety, total taboo. My aunt's treatment for depression, never once acknowledged. My aunt's college boyfriend. She was caught talking to him and was forced to never see him again. That was 20 years ago. She's great now, by the way. Happily arranged, married with kids. That's my side of the family. My husband's side, on the other hand, has also gone silent on two key issues. Religion, we don't subscribe to it. Being child-free, we say, yay, more money. They say, boo, where are our grandbabies? At first, we tried reasoning with them. Now they just don't bring it up. I don't know why. Maybe they think if they don't talk about it, the issue will magically disappear. Honestly, I just feel bad for them. No anger, just pity. They sit there, disappointed and sad, completely unable to understand how happy we are with our choices. Story 39. I posted about this on another thread recently. When I was 4 and my mother was 19, my grandmother requested that my grandfather punish her by raping her. And he did. He raped my mother right in front of me while my grandmother held me back, forcing me to watch. I remember my mother screaming, begging him to stop, the sound of his grunting and my own screams. I screamed, "Mommy!" over and over, but he wouldn't stop, and my grandmother wouldn't let me go. After that, my mother wanted nothing to do with me. She left me with anyone who would take me, mostly my great-grandmother, who died when I was still a kid. And when she couldn't ditch me anymore, she took out all her anger on me. The abuse I suffered at her hands made what her parents did look like Sunday dinner. But just me, not my siblings. No one would talk about it. And when I brought it up, I got beaten for it. One time, my mom let something slip. Something about my birth father, who abandoned me as a baby, claiming that a court-ordered DNA test had proved I wasn't his. He was able to sign away his rights because of it. I always thought it was just an excuse, a lie he told to justify leaving. But recently I did the math, and I realized that the truth no one ever told me is that I'm probably the product of my grandfather raping his 15-year-old daughter. I can't know for sure, and honestly, I don't know if I'm ready to, but it all adds up too well, neater than the story my abusers fed me. I cut them off years ago. My grandfather served 4 years of a 15-year sentence in another state. I don't know the details beyond that. I don't want to know. As far as I'm concerned, my entire family's dead to me. Story 40. When I was 15 or 16, I spent a total of 5 months in psychiatric hospitals and residential treatment programs, plus another 3 months in outpatient care. It's not exactly ignored. We just don't talk about it. What never gets talked about, though, is how I completely threw my mother under the bus for the neglect and emotional abuse that led up to that year. Everything from nights where I didn't eat because she forgot about me in favor of my 4 older siblings, to her telling me that my birth ruined her life, or the time she signed me out of a hospital against medical advice while I was near death, because she didn't believe I was as sick as the doctors said. I was supposed to be transported by helicopter to another hospital. Instead, she decided she could just drive me there and save the money. CPS was called on her 4 times that year. I refused to leave hospitals because I knew what would happen. She would act all loving while I was there, then turn around and berate me for wasting money and refuse to give me my medications once I was home. It was a mess. It's all happening again. The cycle is repeating. I'm just counting down the days until I leave the country for grad school. There are still a lot of days left. Story 41. Oh, let's see. My family is the we don't talk about anything negative type, so this should be a fun list. My sister's suicide attempt in 2007. She's okay now and doing great for herself. One of my uncles disappeared from the family in 2008 after he was caught with child porn and arrested. I got in trouble for casually mentioning to my cousin that our grandmother was having hip surgery. I thought it was common knowledge. Turns out my uncle didn't tell his kids, who were 19 and 21 at the time. Go figure, the same cousins found out about our pedophile uncle from the newspaper. My other sister getting violently drunk at prom. An ongoing feud between my mother, her siblings, and her cousin over my grandmother's end-of-life care. She's since passed, but the tension never fully died down. It's not an all-out brawl, just snide, passive-aggressive comments whenever they're in the same room. Any and all mental breakdowns. And trust me, there have been several big ones in this family. My father's drinking and violent rampages. And then there's Mark, my aunt's adopted nephew. He didn't exactly disappear, but my family treated him like an outsider his whole life, never made him feel welcome. He eventually cut ties with everyone. He's alive and doing okay. He even added me on Facebook. But I don't blame him one bit for staying far. far away. Story 42. My family is from Texas. Before I was born, my chauvinist grandfather ruled the house like a dictator. He taught my grandmother and my mother that they were never supposed to question him or his son, my uncle. Uncle, of course, was the favorite. Mom was the rebel. My grandmother had to have a hysterectomy because of my grandfather's jungle fever. Though I guess I should be grateful in a roundabout way. If it hadn't happened, my mom and uncle wouldn't have been adopted by them. I don't know how to feel about that. To this day, my grandmother follows my uncle's orders without question. My mother, meanwhile, is the black sheep of the family for daring to stand up to him. As for me, I might as well not exist as far as my uncle is concerned. Mind you, my grandfather has been dead since 1984. I guess old habits die hard. Story 43. I didn't even know my grandfather existed until I was 10. I just assumed he had died before then. Turns out he was a mean, violent drunk. Once all my aunts and uncles turned 18, my grandmother finally divorced him, and the family pretty much erased him after that. Even his own brother sided with my grandmother, and our family gatherings were always at his house. Then there's the fire. When I was 4, I set fire to the duplex we lived in. My youngest sister didn't make it. She was only 2. My older sister survived, but she was severely injured. I walked away without a scratch. My parents were already drug users, but after the fire, things spiraled. The pain of burying their daughter pushed them even deeper into addiction. Nobody talks about it. Nobody visits my sister's grave. She didn't even have a gravestone for 10 years. My parents' friends, their drug dealers of all people, were the ones who finally bought one and had it placed. I'm still dealing with it. She would have been 34 this January, and yet it still feels like yesterday. Story 44. Well, this just happened last week, and it's already becoming one of those we don't talk about it situations. My aunt had terminal cancer, and her end-of-life plan was to spend her final days on a farm owned by extended family, deep in Amish country. She wanted to die at home, surrounded by loved ones after dedicating her whole life to grueling work as a nurse. My mom went out there, supposedly to help care for her, to spend some precious last moments together. Instead, she decided it was too much for her to handle. She got frustrated, saying my aunt was ridiculous and unreasonable for not sleeping through the night. And before she left, she bullied my extended family into putting my aunt into a nursing home. My aunt was incoherent, unable to speak for herself. I had no say in the matter. I was 1,000 miles away, and apparently, you just don't understand what it's like. So they moved her into the nursing home. My mom packed up and left. My aunt died 4 days later. She passed away alone in a place she never wanted to be. No one was with her. She died on August 13th. I can barely get through a conversation without breaking down. I'm a mess. My mom? Not a single tear. She doesn't even talk about it. Doesn't want to talk about it. And she wonders why I moved so far away. Story 45. My grandfather lost his farm in a high-stakes poker game. Early the next morning, on a Sunday, he came home to find my grandmother and her younger children dressed for church. He called them all out onto the front porch, told them they were homeless, and then shot himself in the head. My dad saw it happen. So did 3 of his sisters, and my grandmother. My grandfather had suffered from depression for years, and when he realized what he had done, he just couldn't live with the consequences. I found out about this while working on my genealogy. My parents don't want me to ever talk about it. To anyone ever, as far as they're concerned, I'm only allowed to say that he died suddenly. But here's the thing. My son took his own life too, and so have other family members. I think it's important for people to know that just maybe we're genetically predisposed to suffer from depression. But in my family, that's just one more thing that we don't talk about. Story 46. On my dad's side of the family, my Aunt Stephanie had an affair with my Uncle Joe while his wife was dying of cancer. They weren't blood-related, don't worry. It's a long, complicated family situation. After Joe's wife passed, his son Aaron disowned the family for a few years. He couldn't forgive what happened. Fast forward to now. Aaron is 26, a single dad raising 2 sons after his ex left him for another man. Just last year, he started coming back to family holidays. I'm only 17, so my dad only recently told me the full story. Guess I was finally old enough to know. I've gotten to know Aaron a little, and honestly, he's such a sweet guy. I have no idea how he lived through all of this. If you need a visual, just picture John Krasinski with a beard and a slightly higher voice. He looks exactly like him. It's freaky. I was fangirling about it for 20 minutes to my cousins before I realized he wasn't actually John Krasinski. Summary. Just to clear things up, Aaron, the guy I got to know and turned out to be amazing, is my Uncle Joe's son, not Joe himself. Some people got confused. Story 47. There was a wealthy family in the town where I grew up. Not that my family wasn't doing well, but these people acted wealthy, if that makes sense. They had a son my age and a daughter my sister's age. The son played basketball with me. The daughter danced with my sister. Our high school basketball coach was a total asshole. He had favorites, and those favorites weren't based on skill. They were based on how much their families donated to the team. Parents who gave money for uniforms, joined booster clubs, bought their kids success, they got the coach's favor. This family's son was obviously one of those favorites. I wasn't. One week we lost a game we should have won. The coach, angry, scheduled a mandatory practice on a Sunday morning. My family's religious, so we weren't happy about it. I decided to post on Facebook, suggesting we boycott the practice to send a message. I thought my teammates would be on board. One of them was even the son of a priest. Turns out the rich kid didn't like that idea. He tattled on me to his dad. The next day, his father stormed into my sister's dance class, where my mom was waiting for her to finish, and screamed at my mother. In front of everyone. He called her an unfit mother, said she couldn't control her children, humiliated her in public. My mom cried. Another dance mom, seeing this, called my dad. Now my dad is huge, 6 feet 4 inches and 300 pounds. When he arrived, obviously pissed, the rich kid's dad suddenly changed his tune. Immediately apologized to my mom, to my dad, to everyone in the dance studio. Since then, there's been an ongoing, silent feud between our families. They always try to compare their kids to me and my sister, like it's some kind of competition. But here's the thing. My sister is now a professional dancer. I'm finishing my degree in astrophysics. Meanwhile, their son, med school dropout. Their daughter, low-key became a whore. To this day, their family is never mentioned in my house. Story 48. My dad's childhood is shrouded in mystery. I learned bits and pieces from my cousin who heard it from her mother, my dad's sister-in-law. According to her, my dad and his brothers could get away with anything because they grew up in a country ruled by a dictator, and their father was the police chief. No one could touch them without facing horrible consequences. One of the more tame revelations? My dad and his twin used to grow and sell weed when they were younger. That was a little shocking, but fine. But the really fed up part? The eldest brother. He was essentially a pimp in a small town. In his 20s, he owned multiple women and rented them out. The only reason he stopped? Because a lot of those women started disappearing. To this day, no one knows exactly what happened. Maybe he was responsible. Maybe a deal went wrong. Maybe a rival tried to kill off the competition, but everyone blamed him, and suddenly a lot of people were after him. So he ran. He fled the country to escape persecution, and that's why my dad's family all ended up in the U.S. Even now, my uncle is a huge banana. He forced his wife to change her name because her original name was too Mexican. He neglected his son, who has an intellectual disability. There's a family rumor that he's cheated on his wife. And when his daughter went through a rebellious phase, specifically when she started dating black guys, he moved the entire family back to their home country to teach her to behave. No one in my family talks about any of this. We all still go on vacations together like nothing ever happened. But now I look at him in an even worse light. Story 49. It's my in-laws, but hey, family is family, right? My husband's mom and aunt are less than 4 months apart in age. Why? Because their father, my husband's grandfather, got the 16-year-old daughter of a migrant worker pregnant while he was still married. When her family found out, they abandoned her on the farm. And over the years, she had 2 more of his children, while he and his wife stayed married. They all lived together in some twisted sister-wife arrangement, raising their kids as one big dysfunctional family. Eventually, the wife had enough. She left, met a man who actually cherished her, and got remarried in her 40s. The 2 of them traveled the world together before settling down in a cozy house. They turned the front yard into a flower garden and the back into a vegetable garden. Even now, in their 80s, they still tend to it. As for the husband and his mistress, they never left the farm. They never traveled. They never saw anything beyond their small town. The husband, despite everything, was and still is a leader in the church. And his second wife? Now in her late 60s, still working hard labor, bitter as hell. And my favorite part? These good Christians once told my husband and me that we were living in sin because we chose to cohabitate before marriage. They told us we had to get married or break up, or else we were going to burn in hell. Absolutely lovely people. Story 50. My aunt married a convicted pedophile when I was a kid. I'll never forget Christmas dinner that year. He asked my grandpa for his daughter's hand in marriage. My grandpa looked him dead in the eye and said, no. Without missing a beat, the guy turned around and proposed anyway. And my aunt said yes. I was 8 years old and horrified. What made it even worse? She would get upset when us kids came to family gatherings because that means Chris can't come, as if that wasn't the most backwards logic imaginable. My mom wasn't having any of it. She told him to his face that if she ever saw him alone with me or my second cousin, the two youngest kids left, she would break his kneecaps and tell the police it was a football accident at one of the family events. I remember one time my mom went to their house for something. Me and my second cousin had to wait in the car while she explicitly warned him not to even think about stepping outside near us. She was fiercely protective. And honestly, my cousin and I probably owe the fact that he never touched us to my mom. My aunt finally divorced him when he went to jail for something unrelated. But a couple of years ago, he got locked up again, this time for good. A mother came home and caught him with a 5-year-old girl's hand down his pants. Only the closest family talks about it. My aunt has never admitted how badly she messed up. It was kept so secret for so long that my second cousin didn't even know about it until I told her, when she was 16. Story 51. My dad's brother probably had an undiagnosed serious mental illness, maybe paranoid schizophrenia, or some kind of neurological issue. At one point, he called a family meeting. Just him, his brothers, and, inexplicably, my gay cousin, who, by the way, is another thing we don't talk about. My uncle was a civilian engineer for one of the U.S. military branches. He had worked on top-secret projects, and he was convinced that the government had implanted a device in his brain, something they could trigger remotely to cause him excruciating pain if he ever talked about classified information. He believed his computers and phones were being monitored, that he was being watched, and that they might black bag him at any moment. He wanted his brothers to know, just in case something happened to him. They reassured him that everything was fine. Then they did nothing else and sent him home. A couple of weeks later, he was coming back from a jog and found 2 strangers inside his house. At least that's what he thought. In reality, it wasn't his house. He had somehow mistaken someone else's house for his own. But in his mind, these people were either robbers or government agents sent to take him. So he attacked the man, full force wrestling him to the ground. The man fought back, and they tumbled down the stairs. The woman, the man's wife, panicked. She pulled out a gun. She tried to shoot my uncle. She missed. She shot her husband instead. My uncle hit his head and slipped into a coma. A few days later, he died in the hospital. The man he attacked? He was a well-known local musician. His death was all over the news. And the worst part? The photo they used of my uncle was his DMV photo. You know, the kind where everyone looks like a raving lunatic. He also happened to be wearing those giant square-frame glasses, sometimes referred to as rapist glasses. It made him look deranged, like a true monster. The reality, he wasn't a bad person. He was a dedicated father. He volunteered for charity. He went to church. He had just finished his first Boston Marathon and was training for the next one. He loved his job, was even eligible for retirement, but stayed on because he was passionate about his work. But something went wrong inside his head, and the tragedy didn't just ruin his life, it destroyed another family too. No one in my family talks about him anymore. Or if they do, they just say, he died suddenly.